Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Sunny. I'm feeling so spooky today. I'm feeling so spooky today.
Really? Because I'm
Man.
feeling I'm feeling I was gonna say horny, but I feel like that's not even appropriate. I don't know. God, it's like if anyone I really know listens to this, I'm just gonna crumble in on myself and die. But yeah.
Well, I think you really need to commit to an alter ego for this podcast and just call yourself that all the time so you have a kind of like a separate
Well, I
name,
should
a
have
separate identity.
well like using a fake name, which I haven't ever done.
Yeah.
Actually, my oh, it's so good that I used a fake name. Thank God my name isn't Sunny. That would be embarrassing.
Right. So, but hi everyone. Also, welcome to the newest episode of Scary Talk. Today we're talking about something very spooky. We're talking about the Dyatlov Pass. You guys may have heard about this, maybe not. We'll get into it in a sec. But I am feeling very spooky, partially because of the research that this episode entailed. I got pretty spooked. Also, kind of depressed because boy, is this just sad, honestly, but mostly spooked. So very much on brand with the podcast. So that's good. How are you, Sunny?
I'm feeling good. I had a special event this week, and I'm like dressed in a cute outfit, even though I'm all alone at my house, and I'm just in a good mood. It's like I just stared at myself in the mirror for 10 minutes. That's my mood, you know.
Oh yeah, you had your baby shower, right?
Yeah, so when you hear me having to go, I almost said milk my child. When you hear me having to go feed my child, you'll know what's going on when you hear the crying in the
You gotta
background.
wait. You gotta wait till they're a little bit older for that. Just milking for the podcast. Just bring him on.
Yeah, you can hear me
Have him
milk my
contribute to one
child
of the
for the
episodes.
podcast when he says cute things to the camera.
Well, congrats on your fifth child. I'm sure you're really happy. Um, yeah, girl, you stay yourself in that mirror. You go do that. You go be a narcissist. That sounds great. Fuck, I do it all the time.
Thank you.
So kudos to
Speaking
you.
of, I really think you should tell your story of listening to the podcast and laughing. I just think that's so incredible. That's such a moment.
Okay, so it's super ironic that I call Sunny a narcissist, even if I do it as a joke, because I think I might actually be one. So I was on a road trip recently, and my boyfriend and I put on the Halloween episode while we were driving in the car, and because we had nothing else to listen to, and I guess I don't mind listening to my own voice again, partially because I just think I like myself a little bit too much. And we were listening to the episode, and my blonde bimbo joke came on, and I was really laughing. I mean, I was lolling. I was really there, and I was cackling, and that makes me a psychopath, and that's
No,
okay.
it makes
I
you an
just I
icon.
also that. I mean, listen, the the Venn diagrams on those two. Am I right?
Honestly, like if you are a
Um,
psychopath, you're Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted. You know what I mean? Icon.
so there's that. Just airing that out there. Now you guys know a little bit more about me. So anyway, I hope you all are doing good. I think, I really don't want to talk politics. I don't want to talk Corona. So I kind of just want to get right into the meat of this episode, unless you have something else to contribute, Sunny.
Um, no, I think I'm ready to hop in.
Okay, I'm ready to get spooked. If anything, this is gonna take my mind off of other things. So I really want the spooks to get inside my brain. Let's do this. Anything else comes up, we'll make sure to insert it in there. But let's do this. Today we're talking Dyatlov Pass. I don't know if it's Dyatlov or Dyatlov, but I'm just gonna say
I think
Dyatlov.
it's
Uh,
Dyatlov. Dyatlov.
Perfect. So neither of the two. So the Dyatlov Pass. That's what we're talking about today. I sure had heard about it prior to researching for this episode. I don't know if you had, Sunny, but I'm guessing a lot of the listeners have not. So give us some background.
Ooh, okay. Background. This is referred to as the Dyatlov Pass Incident. If you look it up, a lot comes up. A lot more than I thought. I thought when I looked it up that it would be like a couple of links, like a niche YouTube
Same.
video. Yeah, but instead it was like hundreds of links. Just a lot of people interested in this. And because it happened in 1959, a long time ago, there's been a lot of time for new research and stuff to come up, and it's basically been this like recurring topic, I think, in popular culture. So, background, in 1959, there was a group of 10 hikers. They were formed for an expedition across the Ural Mountains, which is in Russia, in Sverdlovsk Oblast, Soviet Union. At the time, it was the Soviet Union. This was the height of the Cold War, to give some history feeling. And in terms of the geography of it, the Ural Mountains are the border between Asia and Europe, and they're on the western side of Russia, but they're still to the east of Moscow, so they were planning to cross the Urals. And essentially, a lot of shit went down. So the leader of the group was Igor Dyatlov. He was a 23-year-old radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and he assembled a group of 9 others for the trip. So each member of the trip, which the trip total was 8 men and 2 women, each member was a grade 2 hiker. So to give an idea of that, they were about to receive their grade 3 certification upon returning, which would have meant that they had to have hiked 190 miles. This is for, I don't know, I guess I assume it's the US folks, but that's 300 kilometers for folks who are not in the US. So that was, at the time, the highest certification available for hiking in the Soviet Union, and they were about to receive it. They were grade 2. So very experienced hikers. The route was designed by them, by this group, in order to reach the far northern regions of the Sverdlovsk Oblast and the upper streams of the Lazva River. And the route was approved. So the goal of the expedition was to reach Gora Otorten, a mountain that was 10 kilometers north of the site where the incident occurred. This route, undertaken in February, was estimated as a Category 3, the most difficult time to traverse. Now, I don't know if anyone here relates to this, but I remember in history class, one thing that would always come up is that countries would try to attack Russia in the winter. Did this ever happen for you, Andre? I feel like this would come up all the time.
Yes.
It was like, this country tried to attack Russia in the winter, and then they tried again, and the stupid hose died both times, because you don't attack Russia in the winter. So
I feel like I heard that in AP Euro.
Literally,
yes.
Yeah. So this route was undertaken in February, so it's still very much cold. And on the 23rd of January that year, they were issued their route book, which listed their course as following the number 5 trail. So, essentially, they gather their 10 people and head off. And I'm going to say their names just because their names come off more in the story, so I think it's nice to have some kind of familiarity with them. So there's Igor Dyatlov. He was the leader, and he was a 23-year-old male who theoretically died from, not theoretically, but who died from hypothermia. There was Yuri Doroshenko. He was a 21-year-old male who died of hypothermia. I'll list the folks who died of hypothermia first. There was Georgy, who or Yuri Krivonishenko, who was a 23-year-old male, died of hypothermia. Alexander Klovatov, 24-year-old male. I'm so sorry I'm butchering this. If we have any Russian listeners, I'm really doing my best. There was Zinaida Kolmogorova, who was a 22-year-old female, and Rustem Slobodin, who was a 23-year-old male, who also died of hypothermia. So then, to go on to people who didn't die of hypothermia, there were 4 more people. Ludmila Dubanina, who was a 20-year-old female who died from internal bleeding from severe chest trauma. There was Nikolai Thibault Brinolis, who was a 23-year-old male who died of a fatal skull injury. Semyon Zolotaryov, who was a 38-year-old male who died of severe chest trauma. So the only person included who wasn't in his 20s. And then Yuri Yudin, who left the expedition early on the 28th of January due to illness. And died at the age of 75 in 2013. So Yuri left early because he was getting knee pains, and he also had some ailments. He had a congenital heart defect, so he turned back and did not continue the hike.
He's lucky.
No, exactly. No one has ever been more grateful for a congenital. Who knew that a congenital heart defect would mean that you lived the longest of the group? You know.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's some reverse. What is it? Reverse. I'm gonna get this. Darwinism. God. Yes. So the group arrived by train at Ivdel, a town at the center of the northern province of Sverdlov Oblast in the early morning hours of January 25th, 1959. They then took a truck to Vizhai, a village that is the last inhabited settlement to the north. So they spent the night there, ate, and then ended up on their hike. So on the 27th they started, of January. On the 28th, Yuri Yudin turned back, went on to live a happy, healthy life, and the remaining 9 continued their trek. So diaries and cameras found around their last campsite made it possible to track the group's route up to the day preceding the incident. On the 31st of January, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began to prepare for climbing. In a wooded valley, they cached surplus food and equipment that would be used for the trip back. That's so funny. I'm so used to seeing cache used in the context of technology. You know what I mean? Like, anyways, okay, yeah. Like the cloud. But the next day, the hikers started to move through the pass. So they moved through the pass. They were planning to get over it and make camp for the next night on the opposite side, but because of worsening weather conditions, with snowstorms and decreasing visibility, they lost their direction and actually ended up west, and when they realized their mistake, they just set up camp there. So they could have gone down about a mile or 1.5 kilometers to a forested area for some better shelter, but they decided that, or the speculation is that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they'd already gained by climbing and wanted to practice camping on the mountain slope. So they camped on a bit of a mountain slope, about a mile up. So before they'd left, Dyatlov had agreed, that he would send a telegram back as soon as the group returned to Vizhai. It was predicted that this would happen no later than the 12th of February, but Dyatlov had told Yudin before he departed from the group that he expected it to be a bit longer. So the 12th passed, and no message had been received, but no one was very surprised, because sometimes these expeditions just take longer. But by the 20th of February, which is 8 days after his expected message, the travelers' relatives demanded a rescue operation. Makes sense. And the Institute sent rescue groups, volunteer students and teachers, and later the army and militia became involved. So there were helicopter searches, that kind of thing. On the 26th of February, so this is now 6 days after when the rescue operation has started, and a total of 14 days since the message was supposed to have been received, so 2 weeks after, the searchers found the group's abandoned tent. They found their abandoned tent. And the campsite, this is where the mystery really begins. It was not at all what you would expect. So Mikhail Sharavin, the student who found the tent, said that the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Investigators said the tent had been cut open from inside. 9 sets of footprints, left by people wearing only socks or a single shoe, or even barefoot, could be followed, leading down to the edge of a nearby woods. On the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometers, 1 mile to the northeast. So
Wait, Sunny, before you keep going, I just wanna remark that to the listeners. Remember that, okay? One shoe or barefoot.
One shoe or barefoot on the opposite side of the pass. Keep in mind, they had not gone over the pass because of bad weather conditions. They had to walk a mile, or 1.5 kilometers, barefoot over that pass that they had decided to camp next to. That's super strange.
Right.
That's a mile. That's not some, so that's significantly further. So after 1,600 feet, these tracks were covered with snow. At the forest edge, under a large Siberian pine, the searchers found the visible remains of a small fire. There were the first 2 bodies, those of Krivonishenko and Doroshenko, shoeless and dressed only in underwear. Only in underwear, so maybe that's what they were sleeping in, but considering it was the dead of winter in Russia, very unlikely they were only dressing in that even to sleep. Why did they stripped? So then, the branches of the tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that one of the skiers had climbed up to look for something, perhaps the camp. Between the pine and the camp, the searchers found 3 more corpses. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, who died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the tent. They were found at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters, so this is 980 feet, or 1,600 feet, or 2,000 feet from the tree. So finding the remaining 4 travelers took them 2 more months. They were finally found on the 4th of May under 13 feet of snow in a ravine that was 246 feet further into the woods from the pine tree, or 75 meters further. 3 of the 4 were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that those who had died first had their clothes relinquished to the others. Dubanina was wearing Krivonashenko's burned, torn trousers, and her left foot and shin were wrapped in a torn jacket. So, that is what they found. I paused for a second just to give a second for how strange this is in terms of what they found. They found a bunch of people right at the entrance to the forest, some people deeper inside. Some of them looked like they were trying to head back to camp. There was a broken tree, suggesting that some of them had tried to climb the tree to see how to get back. Why are they a mile out in the first place? A lot of questions here. The circumstances are super spooky, and there are a lot of different theories as to why this happened. So, Andre, did you have some info on what was found? Like, what happened?
What if I was just like, no, I don't have anything? Actually, no, not really. Thank you everyone for listening. That was our episode. No, yeah. Okay, so I totally agree. I mean, what you described as far as what the search team found, pretty baffling shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people seem to all have died of different causes. They're barefoot, like they're not well clothed, like it's very bizarre. There's like a tent that's been cut open from the inside. What the fuck is that about? So a lot of really strange shit. I don't think it's like you can really grasp the how weird all of this is without looking at pictures. I know that I looked at pictures when I was doing the research. Obviously, this is a podcast, so you guys can only listen to our voices explain this to you. But you really should look at some pictures that will give you kind of the scale of this place, just how snowy it was, just how remote and deserted it looks, and the fact that these people were camping basically in the middle of nowhere while they were doing this expedition, right? And so just also there are pics of like them when they were found. I wouldn't recommend looking at those, but those exist as well. It's pretty bizarre shit. So now this episode's a little different, so I'm going to start by telling you what I believe. And I'm gonna let you know that you'll be hard pressed to convince me otherwise. Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll go into the actual details. I think I can do this in just one sentence. I think it was aliens.
Shut up, Andre.
I think it was aliens. And this is why. Well, no, I guess you guys need more details about shit before I tell you why. But I think it was aliens. I was going to go for cryptids, and then I was doing this research, and I kind of just, like, flipped. I was like, no, it was aliens. And it's because of a number of small details that I'll mention in a second that almost kind of get overlooked when people talk about this case. When I had heard about this case in the past, right before doing this episode, like just on my own, I had never heard these details be mentioned that I'm going to mention to you, and that pisses me off because they seem really important, and that's what takes me to aliens. So here we go.
Okay.
So there was a fucking investigation. There was a legal inquest on these bodies that were found basically immediately after they were found.
Yeah, so one of them had a fatal skull injury. One of them had internal bleeding from severe chest trauma, and another one had severe chest trauma as well.
All 4 bodies were found at the bottom of the creek in a running stream of water. And all these 4 bodies are 4 bodies that are found in May, right, during the initial like search party rescue thing, and these are the first 4 bodies that are examined by this medical group. So this examination of the 4 bodies done in May ends up kind of like shifting the narrative of this incident because it talks about an avalanche. I don't know, they choked on snow. I'm getting a lot of this information from Dyatlov which is a very comprehensive website on all things Dyatlov Pass, so I recommend going there. And also the wiki article for this, which is very comprehensive. So a mix of those 2 things. Basically, the Russian government was like, they died because there was a storm and that killed them, blah blah blah. Now, 4 bodies were found at the bottom of the creek in a running stream of water, and these 4 bodies had soft tissue damage to their head and their face. So, for example, Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, part of the lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of skull bone. That was the girl that I said was missing her tongue.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then so Lotariob had his. By the way, I'm butchering all these names. You guys already know that. Had his eyeballs missing. What the fuck does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What the fuck does that mean? Also, Kolevatov was missing his eyebrows. So interesting. And the forensic expert that examined these bodies judged that these injuries must have happened post-mortem due to the location of the bodies in a stream. So again, they weren't indicative of something that happened that killed them, but rather just post-mortem degradation, whatever. I don't know. I don't hear about like critters eating your eyes after you die. I feel like they usually go for like, I don't know, the gut, but okay. There was initial speculation that the indigenous Mansi people that lived in that area, who were like reindeer herders to that area, had attacked and murdered the group because they were invading their space. But the investigation indicated that the nature of the death did not support this theory because these bodies were missing, I don't know, fatal wounds that would have been inflicted by a group, by the indigenous group kind of like trying to attack them. The investigation was like, no, it couldn't have been that. Only the hikers' footprints were visible in the area where the investigation took place, and there were no signs of hand-to-hand struggle found there. So we don't think that was it. Okay. Now, although the temperature was very low, around like -13 to -22 degrees Fahrenheit, with a storm blowing, the dead were only partially dressed. Right? This is very, very concerning and confusing. Some had only one shoe, like you mentioned, and others only wore socks. So okay, so the reason I kind of paused when you were talking about the shoes earlier is because it reminded me of our cryptids episodes where people are like missing their shoes.
Mm.
Very, very weird, which like immediately to me, like that made me think, oh, cryptids. And also years ago when I first heard about this, I also thought of cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some were found wrapped in snips of ripped clothes that seemed to have been cut from those who were already dead. So, pretty fucked. Now, very, very important details before I go into my alien theory. So, journalists reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claim that it states the following. There's a number of bullet points that I'm reading off of this article. So, 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indicators of other people nearby on Koletsiakil. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best. That's the best I can read it. There were no indications of other people nearby in this area apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. So these are kind of all very important points that were reported on at the time that I do think are actually pretty crucial to us understanding this. Also, traces from the camp show that all group members left the campsite on their own accord on foot, and high levels of radiation were found on only one victim's clothing. That to me is a big highlight. That is very, very weird. I'm just gonna like pin it there for a second. Now, to dispel
Andre
the
has
theory
placed
of
a
an
pin in your mind. One victim
I have
with
placed a pin.
highly radioactive clothing.
Yeah, to dispel the theory of an attack by the indigenous Mansi people. Oh my god. Bostros Denny stated that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by human beings, quote unquote, because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged. Okay. Last 2 bullet points. 1, release documents contain no information about the condition of the skier's internal organs. And 2, obviously there were no survivors. Now, 1 extra bullet point that I'll add there that isn't part of the journalists reporting on the inquest files at the time, but that I think is super, super important, is the fact that there was a related report that there were strange orange. There was another group of hikers, all right, about 50 kilometers, about 30 miles south of the incident. They report that same night they saw strange orange spheres in the sky to the north on the night of the incident. And guess what? Similar spheres were observed in Ivdel and adjacent areas continually during the period from February to March of 1959, which was after this took place, by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorology Service and the military. And these sightings were not noted on the 1959 investigation, and the various witnesses came forward years later. What the fuck? What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so listen. Okay, so these hikers go on these hike. What was it? Like early January of 1959, right? And they get lost. This shit happens. By the time February comes around, like the search party is taking place, etc., etc., etc. Now, February to March 1959, nearby, like people living in nearby areas to where this incident took place are like, there are orange spheres in the sky. Oh, we saw them. You know, these people kind of keep this to themselves, but eventually years later they come forward and say that. I guess it's because of this that this information wasn't included in the 1959 investigation report. But that's not true. Plot twist. So, if I recall correctly, there was this guy that was working on the investigation report as it was being drafted, and he remembers that he at that time, so just try to follow this, he had at that time had already met with a local that had reported to this guy, right, that was aiding in drafting the report, had reported to this guy that he had seen this orange spheres the night of the incident. And so this guy that is helping draft this investigation report, you know, being very honest, sincere, and genuine, tries to include this information on the investigation report because he deems it relevant. Well, a high-ranking military officer catches wind of this, and he's like, "No, you need to leave that out. Just leave it out. It's irrelevant, important. We don't want it on the report." And so it was left out. What the fuck? What the fuck does that mean? So like this is very important because, like, again, these sightings are not noted in the 1959 investigation, and that is presumably because witnesses that, you know, saw this came years later. But that's a load of shit. There was one witness at least that came forward at the time, you know, around the time of the incident in 59, and was like, I saw this, and the investigation report left it out very conveniently.
Okay, but
so
what if, I mean, at the time when they're investigating the deaths of these hikers, I don't think it came off as like, this is going to be the mystery of the decade, you know? So maybe when they were investigating, I could see like, oh, a random villager tells us that there were orange balls in the sky. Maybe don't include that in the report. Like, I don't know if that, I think that kind of makes sense to be skeptical of at first. I think it became more significant as time went on because it's become this big unsolved mystery.
I don't know. I mean, okay, fine. I mean, what you're saying, fine. I'll go with what you're saying. And I guess that deletes the possibility of corruption. Maybe, you know, this wasn't like purposely done to like, you know, hide the truth or whatever. Fine, I'll let that go. But there's still the fact that these sightings took place, and years later these people came forward, whatever, and talked about them. The fact that these sightings took place alone is important. And that's what I'm gonna focus on. That little bit of this case is kind of what I'm focused on because I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go because bitch aliens. Okay, we need to make a T-shirt, by the way, that says bitch aliens. Listen. One of these poor people that passed was missing their tongue. Another one of them had highly radioactive clothing. Only one of them, unless this motherfucker was carrying some uranium in his backpack and didn't tell his fellow hikers. How did this guy become so radioactive by the time they found his body, and only him and no one else? Actually, the uranium theory wouldn't even work. If you're carrying something highly radioactive in your person,
it spreads. Yeah, totally.
So hello, like how did that radioactivity like stay encapsulated and contained within this body by the time they found it? And even if you don't think that's weird, okay, fine. How did this guy become radioactive to begin with in the first place? You know, like how? To me, those are the two big ones. I mean, also the fact that there's the paradoxical undressing, right? That these people seem to have undressed themselves for some weird reason, and you know, they trekked this long, you know, like path of fucking snow barefoot or almost barefoot, and they like weren't properly clothed anymore, and it's kind of unclear why they would have taken their clothes off. It's not like they needed it for anything else. I mean, I've read somewhere like, oh, maybe they had to take their clothes off because they had lost their supplies or some shit
You
or
know what I'm
something, and they were
realizing
trying to
too?
burn that.
Yeah, and it might be
What?
that they had already died and someone else took their clothes off to wear them, and that's why the first two people found were stripped.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess I won't argue with that. That's definitely a possibility if we're going down the route of these people didn't all die at the same time and weren't attacked by aliens, but rather the more the more kind of grounded theory of something happened. They lost their like tent slash some of their resources, and so they had to make a fire with whatever they could. At that point, some of them maybe caught hypothermia and died, and the surviving members took their clothing. Okay, fine. But there's also someone missing their tongue, someone missing their eyeballs, and someone with uranium up their ass. So, yes, Sunny, but also no. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I have more info, but I just
I
I
have
need to
some.
pause for a sec because go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
totally. I have some theories. So
Yes.
I think that the one that seems to be most popular at this particular moment, although I say that with a caveat, but one big one is the idea of an avalanche. So the idea of the avalanche theory is that the group woke up with a panic because they heard some crackling, right? They like hear an oncoming avalanche and cut their way out of the tent, either because an avalanche had covered the entrance to the tent or because they were scared that the avalanche was imminent. Then they were poorly clothed because they'd been sleeping and like ran to the safety of the woods where the trees would help slow oncoming snow. In the darkness of night, they got separated into a few different groups. One group made a fire, hence the burned hands, while the others tried to return to the tent to recover their clothing since the danger had passed, hence the broken tree branches from trying to go up the tree and figure out where the tent was to get back to it. But it was too cold, and they all froze to death before they could locate their tent in the darkness. At some point, some of the clothes may have been recovered or swapped from the dead, but at any rate, the group of four, whose bodies was most severely damaged, were caught in an avalanche and buried under 13 feet of snow. Dubnina's tongue, this is the last part, might have been removed by scavengers in ordinary predation. But the thing with the avalanche theory is that there's some reasons why it might not be. My first personal thing about why I'm a little questioning is just that they were found a mile from their tent. Think about it. Now this was only a 7-mile trail. This was only a 7-mile trail total, and yet they had several days to make this hike because again, it's Russia dead of winter. So to go a full mile in these kinds of weather conditions where each step, you're in the biting cold with wind and snow, that's kind of intense to do if you like hear an avalanche or to even know the direction of the trees and to go out with that little clothing. I think that taking the moment to get some shoes on would be worth it even if you hear an avalanche, or at least you would immediately realize after leaving the tent. The other thing beyond that is there's a few other evidence pieces for why that might not be the case. The location of the incident didn't have obvious signs of an avalanche. There weren't debris distributed, and it had a generally shallow layer of snow. And over 100 expeditions to the region were held since the incident, and none of them ever reported conditions that might create an avalanche. So since then, it hasn't been like, oh, this is an avalanche area. Not particularly. An analysis of the terrain and the slope shows that even if there could have been a very specific avalanche that found its way around, its path would have gone past the tent, and it had collapsed from the side but not in a horizontal direction. So it didn't collapse in the direction it would have had there been an avalanche. And Dyatlov was an experienced skier, and the much older Zolotaryov was studying for his master's certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. That's insane. Neither of these two men would have been likely to camp anywhere in the path of a potential avalanche. And footprint patterns leading away from the tent were consistent with someone running in panic from either real or imagined danger. All the footprints leading away from the tent and towards the woods were consistent with individuals who were walking at a normal pace. Oh, they were inconsistent with someone running in panic. Sorry. The footprint patterns were inconsistent with someone panicked and running. It was more like someone who was walking at a normal pace. That is the creepiest part of this case, because What would cause you to cut your way out of your tent and then walk calmly at a normal pace towards the woods? What would do both of those things at the
Right?
same time? So, here's the thing. I have some YouTube comment theories. And you know what? I know YouTube comments aren't exactly the top place we look for info, but I thought that these had some pretty cool summaries.
Speak for yourself, queen.
Well, I'm the one reading the comments, so maybe that speaks more. Um, but here's one theory that I found on a video about this. Having this is from a person called C space R on YouTube. They say, having read up on the case and seeing the injuries from the autopsies, it very obviously is murder and sadly violent torture. I don't know if it's obviously murder and violent torture. This is Sunny speaking, but this is their theory. Bodies with U-shaped bruises that resemble the butt of a rifle, broken ribs, cracked skulls, signs of strangulation. I don't know about signs of strangulation either. I also looked at the photos, and the fact is that these bodies were so frozen that some of the nasty stuff just looked like stuff that happens when bodies freeze. But that said, evidence of eyes removed while still alive, third-degree burns, no tongue but the frozen mouth found closed, a campfire that was purposely put out, not burnt out, a tent that was made useless by cutting it, a strange photo of someone following them, and most obvious of all, absolutely nobody would walk an hour from the tent in bedclothes unless armed men forced them to do it. To escape an avalanche that never even happened? Or they all went crazy? Seriously? If you look at their backgrounds, most likely at least one hiker was working as a nuclear agent, giving up secrets to another side in a place that was comfortably remote. 2 hikers were recent nuke reactor employees, and this was all during the Cold War with espionage at its highest. Why else would there be radioactivity detected in the middle of nowhere? They were followed, searched for something important, and each tortured for information and then killed. Whether by the Russians, Americans, or Germans isn't known, but that's why it was covered up by the government and all became a mystery. Interesting that one of the hikers was left with a pencil and a notebook in his hand. Probably the killers leaving a warning message to the other side, but it got washed away. It was a terrible Cold War incident not to be made fun of. So this is one theory from YouTube. I am interested in this theory because I do think that the radioactivity is really weird. I'm also curious about, in terms of just one person being radioactive, could it have been some kind of like microwave torture? I don't know. I don't even know if that's possible out in the middle of nowhere. The other thing that I think makes this theory tough is that not everyone had been killed, right? They were just left. They were left for dead. And I guess if you bring them that far out, you can just leave them there and say, you're going to die and not make it back to your tent. But why do that, and why only kill some of them, you know? Why not just leave them all there for dead, or kill all of them, instead of having the possibility of some witnesses?
I really appreciate the confidence of that YouTube commenter, but I don't jive with that theory because, okay, why were these hikers so damn important? Because, like, I mean, I guess to send a message, right? It wasn't that they necessarily had some important information themselves, but it was just, some random Russians that the Americans could have cut to send a message. But that is so brutal and random, even for the Cold War, and like unnecessary, I feel like. So
yeah, I'm kind of interested. Yeah, I mean that one definitely interests me, but I'm not certain of it. I also think that, so there's one other theory on YouTube that's an interesting one, and this person's quoting Lamino's theory apparently. His theory states that the stove that they brought with them was leaking gas in the tent, so one of the campers cut vents. It got out of control, so they ran. It explains the burn marks and why they ran away so quickly with only what they could grab. The tree where some bodies were found also has a small amount of burn sticks, which explains why the branches of a tree were missing, but only to a certain height, and why they would stop under a tree. The 2 bodies found there likely gave up the few clothes they had to protect the other hikers, which explains why other hikers had more clothes. The radiation could have been caused by 2 of the hikers working with radiation, which might have spread from their work clothes to their other clothes. Realistically, though, no one theory can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, which is I'll definitely give them that one. So
yeah, that guy, let me know. He's a YouTuber. So this guy has a YouTube channel, and he actually has a very interesting video on the Dyatlov Pass that I watched, and I actually did get some information from that video. It's kind of long, but I do recommend it. And all of his information is great. He's able to like really summarize a lot of the release documents to a more digestible form. But I don't know about his theory. I didn't jive with that because Well, probably because I'm so biased towards the paranormal. To be honest, I'm kind of shitty. It's not his fault. I mean, it's a frank theory. Yeah.
No, totally. But I don't know. It's interesting the variety of theories here too, because there's also the infrasound theory. Have
Ah,
you?
yes. Talk about
Okay.
that.
So this is one of the more interesting explanations. I think. I don't think that makes it convincing. I think some of the most convincing are maybe the avalanche, maybe something involving a government cover up. I'm more leaning towards those than this. But the infrasound hypothesis is that not to bias you, because maybe you'll feel confident in this one. In simplest terms, a Kármán vortex street is an oscillating pattern that emerges when a fluid or gas, in this instance wind, flows around a suitably shaped object, in this instance the peak of the mountain. When they occur on a large scale, these wind patterns can theoretically generate very low frequency sound waves that have been blamed for harmful physiological and psychological symptoms in human beings. Now, this may seem kind of wild, but if you've listened to our past episodes, we did hear about really strange occurrence in Cuba and I think in China as well, where after just
Yes.
hearing one small sound, people had lasting issues resembling that of receiving a traumatic brain injury. Not even like a
Well,
particularly loud or violent sound. What?
well, wait a second. Some of them say that they did listen. This is about our diplomats episode, or not but like
Unsolved Mysteries
unsolved
episode,
mysteries. We were
yeah.
talking about the Cuban whatever. So the U.S. ambassadors in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them say they listened to that. They heard it a number of times in the workplace. So it
Mm.
wasn't just once, and then they were like fucked forever. Also, remember that the implication there, at least that I made, was that those definitely must have been man-made, and that if it indeed was an attack, well, then obviously it was an attack and it was man-made. Whereas this thing that you're describing, one, really rare, and two, a natural phenomenon. I don't know how powerful that could really be.
No,
I don't think it
totally,
would really.
totally. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
the same thing, but I think just the idea of a sound fucking someone up is a little more
Mhm.
real
Mhm.
now. But so basically this argument is that this phenomenon could have occurred under the extremely high wind conditions that happened on the peak of that mountain the night of the incident. The resulting bombardment of the skiers by infrasound waves could have induced severe panic and caused them to flee the safety of their tent and meet their deaths. Again, though, you hear a weird sound and then run a mile into the night, and not even run, walk a mile into the freezing Russian winter night.
That's the thing, right? That's the
Pretty
weird
tough.
thing. Like whether you're talking when you're talking about like cutting out of your tent, like you said, cutting out your tent, like cutting your tent from the inside to escape it, assumingly,
Hmm.
and then for you to walkly come, according to the way the footprints were set in the snow, right? Because they weren't too deep, they seemed pretty shallow,
Hmm.
and I'm guessing these people accounted for the fact that they had the expedition, that the investigation, the search rescue was taking place sometime after the initial footprints were set there, because obviously snow is going to keep falling. So even accounting for that fact, the footprints still seem shallow enough that it seemed that these people walkly calmed away from their sight, not ran away. That is super weird. So I
Hmm.
totally understand what you're saying.
Totally. Also,
Yes.
fun fact that the mountain.
You mean fun fact? Actually, really, really sad fact?
No, fun fact, like really cool fact, is that their campsite was on a mountain called Koletsyakl, which isn't originally Russian. It's originally from the indigenous Mansi language, and it means dead mountain. So they were on
Correct.
Dead Mountain. That's
They were on
that's
Dead
also
Mountain. Yes.
spooky. I don't know. That's just like what. It reminds me of
I almost I almost want to go up to a Muncie and be like, "Yo, why did you call it that?" And maybe that'll give us some insight,
No,
right?
honestly, and they're like, well, everyone who's ever camped there has died, and it's like, case closed.
Oh, okay. I want to touch on a more grounded theory before I kind of like go full speed ahead with the aliens, and this is the katabatic wind theory.
Hmm.
So in 2019, a Swedish-Russian expedition was made to the site, and in 2019, like people are still like trying to figure this out, which is really admirable. I mean, I'm glad. It's just kind of crazy, and I also kind of wonder. I mean, like physical evidence degrades and shit. Like, how reliable is anything that they could be looking at now?
Yeah,
So many
totally,
decades later,
totally.
but whatever. So in 2019, this expedition was made to the site, and after investigations, they proposed that a violent katabatic wind is a likely explanation for the incident. Katabatic winds are somewhat rare events and can be extremely violent. Apparently, these kinds of winds were implicated in a 1978 case at Anaris Mountain in Sweden, where 8 killers were killed and 1 was seriously injured in the aftermath of the katabatic wind. That is Katabatic wind, for those who want to look it up. The topography of these locations were apparently noted to be very similar to each other. So a sudden katabatic wind, these investigators assume, could have made it impossible to remain in the tent, and so the most rational course of action would have been for the hikers to cover the tent with snow and seek shelter among the tree line. There was also a torch left turned on top of the tent, possibly left there intentionally so the hikers could find their way back to the tent once the wind subsided. And the expedition proposed that the group of hikers must have constructed 2 bivouac shelters, one of which collapsed, leaving 4 of the hikers buried with the violent injuries observed. And a bivouac shelter is kind of like an improvised campsite, or a shelter that is of like a temporary shelter, basically, like made with like whatever you can fucking find, a stick, whatever. So that is a theory. There were these crazy winds, and they were like, we gotta leave here and go to the tree line where we'll be protected from the winds, but we should have some kind of marker to go back to our shit, aka our tent, once the wind subside. And so they left like a torch, which seems super fucking random to do, but okay. But I'm just gonna go with no, because what are the odds, number one, and number two, everything else that we talked about. So that's the katabatic wind theory. Thoughts?
I don't know. It's interesting that it came up more recently. That said, though, I don't know. I just don't see it. That took me a long time to say, but I'm not sure about that.
No, that's fine.
Especially because they discovered that so recently. Why wouldn't they have thought of that like 50 years ago?
Well, no, I mean that alone shouldn't discount the theory, because shouldn't count it out, because it's kind of like I said earlier, right? Like 1959, the initial medical report wasn't great because of the lack of advanced forensic tools that this tiny town in Russia had. That's understandable. As technology advances, when you know better, you do better, right?
That's
so fair. I don't think that alone should discount it, the fact that it's a recent theory, because maybe they just put 2 and 2 together just now, and they were like, hey, this happened in 1978. Maybe that's the same thing that happened to these Russian hikers in 1959. That's fine. To me, it's more the fact that it is so rare for this to happen. And also, like I said, everything else that we have, information-wise. The fact, to me, I can't let these 3 things go, right? The fact that there's a tongue missing, eyes missing, and a radioactive guy. Like, to me, that doesn't speak katabatic wind. Now, aliens, bitch. So, oh my god. Okay, first off, orange spheres the night of the incident, seen by locals. Super fucking weird. Explain me that, right? Number 2, literally what I just said. People are missing. People really do be missing their eyes. People really do be missing their tongue. So
okay, well, there's a theory regarding the fireballs in the sky that I also find interesting.
Oh, let me guess. Is it the parachute military test bullshit?
No, it's like an energy wave theory.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
think this one is interesting because this theory was proposed 31 years after it happened, and it was proposed by one of the original investigators who investigated the case from the start, named Lev Ivanov. So one of the original reports, as you mentioned, there were reports from eyewitnesses about fast-moving balls of fire in the night sky around that time. There is the theory that they were Soviet missile or rocket tests, but there's another theory, which is that the fireballs exploded or emitted a beam of unspecified energy that directly caused the skiers' deaths. So as Ivanov has proposed, he proposes that that the sightings match up with the date of the incident, the 2nd of February, and that there's just some kind of energy that came from the fireballs that caused their death.
I'm sorry, where do the fireballs come from again?
That's a good point. His theory doesn't include it. It doesn't seem to. But I think it is just interesting that he would come back and find, because as someone who's worked on this originally, and it's been 30 years, he's been so knee deep in this case for so long, and that's a theory that he finds convincing enough to make his theory. Um,
I mean, listen, people who have been really invested in their work can sometimes end up being the least kind of credible sources when it comes to anything about their own work, precisely because they're so knee deep in it that they can't see the big picture. Think J.K. Rowling. Think about the fact. Think about the fact that this woman created this masterpiece of work, and then she was like, "Let me tweak these to death," and also now it's like fighting people on Twitter over like turf ideology. I don't know. Listen, the point is that people can go crazy when they're so invested in their work and they kind of try to tinker with it too much and they end up believing things that may not really jive with the things that their former selves would have believed or subscribed to. So
I guess that's
I hear
possible.
you. I hear you. No, I mean, it needs to be possible, Sonny, because where the fuck did those fireballs come from?
No, I mean
I
that's
mean,
possible, but I just am saying that if anything, the fact that he believes this theory shows how much of a difficult mystery it is, right? Because even after having been
right,
involved for
right,
30 years, this is at one time at least what convinced him the most. Yeah.
right. Okay, now, okay, so I need to clarify something. So I
Mm.
know that I said before that aliens aren't violent. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You know, there are sci-fi movies where they are portrayed that way. I choose to not believe that because from the testimonials that I've read about alien abductions, it seems to me that these aliens just kind of want to experiment with you, take some egg or sperm samples, and then let you go. Probably to make alien babies, by the way. But
Oh my
that's
god,
a whole other
what
story.
if there are humans in a zoo in like another place?
Probably.
Honestly,
I mean,
that's my dream. That's my dream. Just to be a human in a zoo. Take me now, aliens.
oh my god. Listen. So again, I don't usually believe in violent aliens, but just the fact that these orbs exist and that to me they can't be explained away by fireballs, therefore they should be UFOs, tells me that maybe there are violent aliens. Because if I think it is aliens, then I have to explain the fact that these people were missing some other soft tissue, and obviously in my head I would attribute that to the aliens, which would make them violent. So there's
I
that.
don't know though.
Now,
I think if you've seen like a lot of reports of aliens that are non-violent, then this might just be like something different, you know? Because this is such a specific
right,
case.
which takes me back to cryptids, which was the main thing that I used to believe
That's a
before I
big
kind of flipped the
hypothesis here,
switch.
and it relates to that photo, so we should hit that for sure.
Oh, you know it. So actually, you can kind of go ahead and hit that. I'm gonna give some unrelated information to this case about cryptids in the area. So apparently, there are some interesting cryptids in the wilderness of Russia that have been reported.
Mm.
There's apparently mammoths that have supposedly been seen in the taiga a few times, and there's like this very interesting detailed sighting from 1918 of a mammoth, though some cryptozoologists consider this story inadmissible for obviously a number of reasons, like the fact that mammoths allegedly went extinct a long time ago.
Mm.
There's apparently also two giant bears reported in the Russian Far East. One is this like gigantic jet black bear, like a couple times bigger than a grizzly, and the other is like twice the size of the previous bear that I mentioned. So I guess four times bigger than a grizzly. So these things are gigantic if they are real, and they're not the same cryptids. They're like two different kinds of gigantic bears apparently. Also, supposedly, Eastern Russia has its own version of the Thunderbird, and this is the one that I found most interesting because what do birds like to do? They like to pick at things with their beaks, like eyes and tongues, maybe.
Mm.
Um, I know that sounds super stupid, but dude, Siberian Thunderbird, okay? Also, there are apparently two types of Mongolian death worms in the Siberian taiga, and but nobody. I couldn't find like names for these things. They're just described as like Mongolian death worm. Okay, um, and that's very interesting because I had actually heard about that cryptid before this case. I'd heard about a Mongolian death worm existing in that area. So there's that.
That is interesting.
Um,
I wonder about I don't know, because Russia's so big. I know that Siberia is to the east of the Ural Mountains, and I actually don't know if they started from the east or the west of the Ural Mountains. But yeah, I do
Hmm.
like the cryptid theories though. Um, Also, those were just
What were you
cool.
gonna say though
Also,
about the cryptids?
oh, I was going to say that a big theory is that there was a Yeti sort of beast. So one
Mm.
photo found on a victim's camera from the incident shows. I'll describe it the best I can, but honestly, if you look up Dyatlov Pass, camera, photo, Yeti, it'll come up pretty quickly. But basically, it's this very distant, blurry figure that's all dark, and it's like about to take a step through the snow, and it's about knee deep in snow. And it's
Hmm.
seen through a sort of path in the trees. So, of course, it could just be that it was a photo taken by someone of the climber behind them, especially because there's like a path straight to it, whatever the creature is. I will say
Hmm.
though that the photo's very blurred, it's hard to tell, but the way the thing is walking, which like is kind of with its whole body, and just
Hmm.
like from a distance, I can definitely see how you would be like, that looks like a Yeti. Because it do look like a Yeti
I'm
from
lo-
the distance, but
I'm,
um,
I'm looking at the picture right now. It looks kind of fake, but sometimes pictures that look like the fakest are like real.
that's a good
I know that
point
sounds so
too. It really
stupid,
could be fake.
but I have experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, no, no. I know. I really. I mean, it could obviously. I think that's like a given. But I was just saying, like sometimes pictures that kind of look fake actually are real, and I have experienced that. I know that sounds stupid, but it is true. Um. Yeah. Okay. Now, I love that. I absolutely love that theory. Maybe it's kind of bringing me back to cryptids again.
Mm-hmm.
When I was thinking of cryptids in the past, when I thought about this case, I actually hadn't thought Yeti at all, and I hadn't heard about what you just talked about. This is completely new to me. I somehow missed that. I was thinking more Mongolian death worm, and I think the fact that that is so unlikely made the aliens be able to take over really easily, in my ranking.
Totally.
But dude, Yeti, are you kidding me? Like, imagine this: you hear this thing coming,
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, wait,
and
wait. I have a
you're like,
theory.
"Fuck!"
Yeah, so you cut your way out
Like,
of your tent, but then you have
yes,
your
maybe
gun,
because the zipper's
right? You
stuck,
have a gun,
or
so you walk pointing the gun at the thing as it like approaches. Yeah.
slowly.
And then but it keeps approaching, so you keep walking away slowly. But then I guess the footprints would be backwards probably.
Yeah, the footprints would be backwards. So maybe they were walking away. Maybe there was no gun. But again, they did cut through their thing. Maybe because the zipper was stuck, or it was too loud, or something, or maybe the Yeti was coming in the direction of the tent's, opening, and so they needed to exit from the side. Whatever. Like, to me, that would explain. Oh my God, that would explain why they walked so far, but didn't run.
Mhm.
That would explain
I
that.
think it would explain it for me too, but I don't
Fuck.
know. That is such a I don't know, man. My belief in cryptids is toe deep, which is to say not strong at all. um
Man, Sonny, you need to jump into that ball. You need to jump into that cryptid cereal ball, that delicious cryptid cereal ball, and get a taste of those loops.
I'm
Listen,
much more of a like government cover up. Well, even that I guess I'm not very into, but I'm much more into weird paranormal things that involve people, I guess.
I mean, I guess, but listen, how many government cover ups do we know of nowadays? Too many, which means they're fucking terrible at covering shit up. And or they release their own documents from the time about their cover-ups. But I feel like that's more the exception and not the norm. I feel like usually we know about a lot of government cover-ups because a lot of like rogue participants kind of come about and they spill the beans when
Oh
they weren't
yeah,
supposed to,
always a
decades
whistleblower.
later. Right. So like again, to keep a conspiracy so large, so like to keep a tight lid on that, it's really difficult. And the fact that this happened, what, 80 years ago? Fuck, no, I'm so stupid. 60 years ago. Something would have come out already about like, oh yeah, I work for the Russian government and blah 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 blah. Gorbachev. Okay, no. So I understand, but I just don't. I don't
That is
think
a
that's what
fair
it was.
point. Considering how much the government has changed, you would think that someone would come out, especially when it's become this big unsolved mystery that everyone is trying to investigate.
Precisely. Also, the point that I was trying to make earlier with the fact that we know so many government cover-ups is the fact that they're pretty terrible at covering them up. Like governments, at the end of the day, are just people. People are stupid. People make mistakes. Like, I just don't see it. Also, like I was talking about earlier, the way these people were tortured if that is what it was, that they were tortured, is so random. And also to pick these like couple of random Russian hikers to send a message to someone,
I
like,
don't
and
know though,
risking.
because I don't know how. I mean, the problem is that a lot of them were college students, so it's true that I don't even know if they had the chance to be involved in like government intrigue yet. But there are
Hmm.
some theories about them being part of Komsomol, which was like a Leninist young communist league, so it could have been along party
Hmm.
lines. There's also the theory about like a couple of them having been involved in a nuclear reactor. I guess there's some. I don't know how strong the evidence is there, but there's some possibility there of there being some issue there. Mm.
I don't know. They seem pretty inoffensive to me. You could be right, but I'm just gonna say evil aliens or Yeti, dude. Like, my God.
It
Yeah.
is just so,
Yeah.
experienced hikers, and it's the duality between the cut open tent, which seems to indicate such like a frantic, and the bare feet, and then the walking. That's the thing. It really does sound like someone shoots a gun in the air, says, "We're gonna shoot you. Get out of your tent right now," and then they cut their way out and are forced to walk barefoot. You know?
Dude, what if they took their shoes off because the shoes were noisy or something, and they figured that barefoot, like doing it barefoot, would attract less attention to them?
Mm.
Like, fuck, dude. Oh my God. Wow, you really brought Yeti out of nowhere, and now it's like kind of like my top two. Like,
Well, I'm glad.
damn.
I'm happy it was convincing.
Oh my God, how did I not think of that? Anyway, this is a lot.
Yeah.
um, no, this case, brah, this case is a lot. But I think we're gonna stop it there, man. I mean, we could go on about theories all day, but those are really the main ones. We hope that you all liked this episode. If you did, please do leave us a review on whatever podcast listening platform you use to listen to us. Remember that we are available everywhere, and that you can send us topic ideas for future episodes at Talk Scary on Instagram and Twitter, and at Scary Talk on Facebook. Sunny, anything else to
We
add?
love you. Thank you.
Yeah, stay away from, dude. Don't go hiking.
Yeah,
Fuck
you
that.
might you
Fuck
might
that.
think I'm almost the highest level of hiker there is, and then the Ural Mountains Death Mountain is gonna come and smack you across the face and then tell you to walk slowly away. So watch out.
Yeah, dude, just fuck that. Just walk around your house in circles. You want to hike? Also, you can't do anything right now because COVID. What the fuck are you gonna do? Get on a plane? Go somewhere? Like get on a plane to the Ural Mountains?
See more
Hello.
than 5 friends at a
So
time? You wish this hike wouldn't happen in our current times.
thank you, COVID. Oh my God. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you all next week, and thank you so much for listening. Good night.